Good afternoon. It's so great to be here in New York because I really feel a great energy here, especially from the investing perspective. I, as was previously mentioned, am a partner at FLOODGATE, and we are a very early stage investor. I like to say that we either invest early or way too early in companies. It's been an exciting time for the last week as people have been debating the role of investors, whether it's super angels, microcap VCs, venture capitalists, collusion, secret dinners. Especially on the West Coast, it's been very exciting. I'm really excited to be back out here in New York to escape some of that. But since I only have 9 minutes, I'm not going to be talking about those issues. Rather, what I'd like to address you about is how Web 2.0 has created a sea change in the competitive dynamics of many different industries and also of governments. And as a result of that, what kind of funding I believe will happen in the future. And as part of that, I wanted to discuss a little story that I have for you, which comes from one of my students at Stanford. And this picture sort of brings to bear what issues that I have as I'm talking to some of my students about joining my portfolio companies. I had one student who was a physics major, minoring in electrical engineering, and she could code. She was the dream candidate for many of my portfolio companies, which are mostly software companies. And I was talking to her to try to sell her on the notion of joining one of these companies. And she turned to me and she said, you know, Anne, I'm going to join a biotech company or a clean tech company. And the reason why is in a biotech company, I'll be saving human lives, or in the clean tech company, I'll be saving the earth. And that just seems so much more meaningful than creating a lot of digital junk. Digital junk. I was totally pained to hear that from one of my most promising students, that in her eyes, I, who believed that I was investing in sea-changing, game-changing, industry-changing companies, that I was investing in digital junk. And to me, that was more of the problem of how we were positioning ourselves, both as entrepreneurs and as investors. What is Web 2.0? And to date, when we think about Web 2.0, this is sort of the picture that comes to mind. Social media, it's status updates, it's where you are, it's user-generated content, it's friending the world. This notion of social media and Web 2.0, in my opinion, is just all the features that we have. It's not the underpinning of what is truly fantastic about what we've created with Web 2.0. Because in reality, the power of Web 2.0 is that it has freed information in a way that threatens existing industries as well as the way in which governments operate. And we've seen this in some instances, for example, in the elections in Tehran. And there's been some debate as to what impact Twitter actually had, but I saw it for myself where students at Stanford, Persian students at Stanford, were trying to engage the other students to try to get involved with getting the word out about the election in Iran. They were using tools like Facebook and Twitter to do this. And students who otherwise wouldn't have cared started to care. Or the fact that the Great Firewall of China blocks Facebook and blocks significant information sites shows you that the power of information is something that governments that are afraid of having that giving that power over to the individuals, those are the types of sites that they're worried about. And that tells me that there is significant power in what Web 2.0 has to offer. And because of that, I'm hopeful that as we try to win in this war for talent, that we have the capacity to do that as well. And in fact, as I was studying some of the big companies that have emerged over the last 5 years, I started to see a general trend. And so there have been about 1,500 companies in any given year that have been funded for the first time over the last 5 years. And out of those 1,500 companies in each year, there appears to be about 15 companies that achieve a valuation greater than $500 million at exit. Those are companies that I call Thunderlizards. What are Thunderlizard companies? These are some companies that have potential or have already exhibited signs of being Thunderlizards. Thunderlizards comes from the concept of Godzilla. Godzilla was hatched from radioactive atomic eggs, swims across the Pacific Ocean, emerges in Tokyo Harbor with an attitude, and proceeds to eat buildings, stomp on trains, and completely destroy Tokyo. And that is the kind of entrepreneur that I, as an investor, like to fund. There are companies like Chegg that has taken on the textbook industry and flipped it over, providing a rental option to students that spend nearly $2,000 on textbooks every year. Groupon is another company that achieved $1 million in revenues within $1 million a month in revenues within 3 months, from what I've heard. And they were going after the local couponing market, a market that most people thought was impossible for a startup to go after. Or you think about SolarWinds, which is a company that has really innovated upon the notion of how you capture customers and how you deliver solutions to customers in network monitoring. They're bridging a digital divide between what large companies could typically get in networking monitoring solutions and now what small, medium companies can get. And Twitter has clearly had an impact by allowing people to distribute information in such a powerful way. Just imagining the fact that the earthquake in Haiti, that news was broken by someone who was in the rubble who managed to get a tweet out that there was an earthquake in Haiti. The power and the speed at which information travels today is going to have a huge impact in the way people compete within industry. Whether it's a large company or a small company, the dynamic nature of competition today is something that is truly significant. And this dynamism has created a lot of really interesting trends, and this is what I think is truly the underpinning of Web 2.0. We have demand generation and capture in a way that was totally not possible even 5 to 10 years ago. The access to scalable computing and storage is something that has allowed entrepreneurs to start up a company on a credit card. And the ability to access your users directly, and those users are now your customers, not a huge hierarchy. You don't have to go to the CIO to make a sale. That is incredible when you think about it. And finally, data as a business model. All of these trends are really interesting to me, and I believe that this is the underpinning of Web 2.0. What does that mean for the funder? Well, I believe that there is a false dilemma being presented to entrepreneurs today. You're either a venture capital firm that funds Thunderlizards, or you're a super angel that funds really small rinky-dink companies. And the truth of the matter is that isn't the dilemma that the entrepreneur is facing, and I believe that there is a third door. That third door is what I call dynamic capital. And in spite of what people talk about and how they actually present themselves, I think there are a lot of different companies, a lot of different firms that fit into this space. Some that are actually in New York, like Union Square Ventures, Andreessen Horowitz, and now Greylock Partners is also talking about allowing Reid Hoffman $20 million to invest in startup companies. But dynamic capital means that you're providing funding for the entrepreneurs not determined by the fund dynamics. We aren't talking about the number of dollars that go into a company, but rather what you need as an entrepreneur. We guarantee fast diligence and a fast answer. We lead investments and we come with a perspective. That's the obligation of the investor. On the part of the entrepreneur, though, taking dynamic capital actually means that you have to have Thunderlizard ambitions. That might not be right for every entrepreneur, But my fundamental belief is that these great outcomes come from people who go for greatness. Web 2.0 is creating a surge in a new way of competing. And if that is true, a lot of amazing companies will be determined in the next coming years. And we believe that as investors in this space, we want to see the entrepreneurs who have those kinds of ambitions. Thank you.